Okay, I'll mute people as well. So if you're drinking your coffee, I won't hear you slurping. All right. Good. Okay. Thank you for joining me again on Hanukkah. Very brave to be involved in learning rather than out and about in the town square. But we're going to be dealing with a practical Indian again this week. We've moved away from some of the Agadah, and we actually started the Indian last week, well and truly, and it was the Hilchot of Mezuzah. And how do we come to Hilchot Mezuzah here in the Sechet Yuma, which is about Yom Kippurim? Very often the Gemara finds ways of wangling itself into any Indian it really wants to. But the process was that the Mishnah, which we originally studied many months ago, deals with the halachas of the Kohen Gadol and how he's placed into a temporary accommodation for the 7 days preceding Yom Kippur to keep him away from forms of tumah, so that he will be fit to carry out the avodah on Yom Kippur. At the same time, he's briefed on the Yom Kippur service. So while he is in this chamber, which was called the Lishkas Parahedrin, it becomes his home for 7 days. And a Gemara told us that there were many chambers in the Beis Hamikdash, but only this particular chamber, the Lishkas Parahedrin, where the Kohen Gadol was sequestered for that 7-day period, carried a mezuzah. All the other chambers, even though there were people coming in and out and warming themselves and doing things in there, etc., did not carry a mezuzah. But the Lishkas Parahedrin carried a mezuzah. And there was actually a machloket as to why the Lishkas Parahedrin needed a mezuzah, whether it needed a mezuzah. The fact is that it did carry mezuzah, and according to one opinion, there was a need for this particular Lishka chamber to have a mezuzah, because it was, after all, his home for 7 days. And even though it's just a temporary home and the rest of the year it wasn't really being used for lodging purposes, that was enough of a reason for it to have a chiyuv, an obligation to carry mezuzah, the fact that it was habited during the 7-day period. Another opinion said there was really no need for the Lishkas Parahedrin to carry mezuzah. It was only a temporary place to go in and out, a bit like a sukkah on Sukkot, which is only used during Sukkot. So it really didn't need a mezuzah. Why did it have a mezuzah? It had a mezuzah because with the Kohen Gadol being placed into that particular chamber, the fact that it didn't have a mezuzah might have resembled a prison, because the Gemara told us that one of the buildings that doesn't need a mezuzah is a prison. Even though you have long-term prisoners living there, it's their entire home, they do everything there, they eat there, they read there, they sleep there, they might sew mail bags or whatever it is, labor you give them within their cells. They don't need a mezuzah because they're being held against their will. They're compulsory residents. And if you're a compulsory resident, even though you're a resident, you don't need a mezuzah on your place of compulsory residence. If the Kohen Gadol was in the Lishkas Parahedrin and he did not have a mezuzah, people might say, you know what, the Kohen Gadol is sort of locked up in that cell for this 7-day period. And it doesn't look nice for a Kohen Gadol to appear to be imprisoned, even though we know in fact that he wasn't. So therefore they placed a mezuzah on. So according to this opinion, the mezuzah was only cosmetic, really, in order to give it the appearance of at least a home where a person can walk in and out, where a person isn't being held against their will, isn't being trapped and confined. So on the topic of mezuzah, once we were in it, the Gemara decided, well, this is a good place to take a break and talk about mezuzot in general. We had quite a lot of material last week about various rooms that did and didn't require a mezuzah, and we had an interesting discussion about the gates to cities as well, and we talked about the gates to the city of Mezuzah and Bovel, and it did not have a mezuzah on. This was an entrance gate into the city itself through the city walls. The Gemara asks, why doesn't it have a mezuzah? At least 50% of the population of Mezuzah are Jewish, and therefore should it not carry mezuzah? And the Gemara gave all sorts of potential answers to it, most of which were rejected. And the one that was eventually accepted was, yes, in theory, it should have had a mezuzah, but because it was an entrance into a town where there were Jews and non-Jews, and the non-Jews might have suspected the Jews in some sort of sorcery by placing these strange scrolls on rods into the wall of their town, for the sake of pikuach nefesh, and generally the safety of the Jewish community, the mezuzah was not put up somewhere even where there might have been an obligation for it. So we learned from there an additional rule that even when there is a need for a mezuzah, if it is dangerous to place a mezuzah because the non-Jews are going to react to it in some way, attack the home or whatever it is, the mezuzah isn't needed. What happens in practice is, of course, people still have a mezuzah, but they move the mezuzah into a place where it isn't visible to the public passing outside, either inside the door frame, which is certainly not preferred. It's b'diavad. It's something that only happens when it's absolutely necessary, or they disguise it in some way so that it isn't obvious to the public that it is a mezuzah. And we've seen this even in recent weeks, where I've been told of people in England and various towns who have actually removed the mezuzahs and put them inside as a result of the anti-Semitism. I mean, in the main Jewish areas, that's not happened, but in some of the more areas where Jews live amongst a large majority of non-Jews, not really in Jewish districts, this has become more of an issue. Having a mezuzah on the door attracts attention, and people don't want stones to be thrown through their windows. So we saw something of that last week. This week we're going to go back again to discuss mezuzah in more detail, bringing more examples of places that may or may not need a mezuzah. And I'm moving you forward to Daf Yud Aleph Amud Beis. We're actually skipping an Amud or so from where we last left off in the text, because it's purely circular argument, really. It doesn't take us further into new material. So I'm moving you to Yud Aleph Amud Beis 11b. If you have the sheets, those are the sheets I attached to the invitation, to the Zoom invitation yesterday. And we're going to start 10 lines from the top. 10 lines from the top of Yud Aleph Amud Beis. The first word on the line is tiyufta. And we're going to start on the second word, tani. Okay, so the Gemara now brings a statement made by an Amora in the name of Tanon. Essentially, this Amora is quoting a brisa, Tanaitic material, which carries a lot of authority. Tani Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda Kamei Rava. Rav Shmuel, the son of Yehuda, taught the following brisa, which he had a tradition for, this particular halachic statement, in front of Rava. Rava was one of the great fourth generation Amoraim in Bavel. And what is it that he taught? He had this statement, which was a statement of halacha regarding places that need or don't need a mezuzah. Shisha sha'arim paturin min ha-mezuzah. There are 6 types of gates. Gates doesn't necessarily mean what we mean gates. Entranceways, doors would also be within the meaning of sha'ar, gates over here. 6 doorways which are exempt from a mezuzah. And here they are. One of them is, and let's just do them in order, we may need to discuss a few of them in greater detail. Beis HaTeven, which is a house in which you store a house. It is a barn in which you store straw. So you have straw for animals or whatever it is, or straw because you're going to use it for cleaning purposes, to make brooms or to thatch your roof or whatever it is. Such a place, which is a storage place for straw, does not need a mezuzah. Next, Beit HaBakar, a cattle shed of some sort, doesn't need a mezuzah. We're talking about places which are designated entirely for these activities, not sort of general areas where you might spend part of the time, but rather they're absolutely designated. And I also want to make the point that some of the examples we bring here and later on are not necessarily the halacha. So let's read it here, because the halacha has slightly broadened its remit on when we place mezuzahs on nowadays to the essential situation we find in the Mishnah. So that's a cattle shed of some sort, Beit HaBakar, or Beit HaEtzim, which is a wood house, right? Whatever you might call it, a wood store, where you would keep the wood for whatever, for burning or for construction or anything else, at the back of your home in the courtyard. Also does not need a mezuzah. Ubeit HaOtzerot, and here that it's not entirely clear what this means. So this is one of the areas where halacha wouldn't necessarily hold the same way today. It means a place in which you store things. You might store your wine or your food, etc. In other words, you wouldn't sit in there necessarily and eat, but you would use it rather as a large walk-in cupboard, shall we say, might also come under this category. Doesn't need a mezuzah. The Sha'ar Hamodi, I think it's Hamodi, and a Median gate, the Medes and the Persians. So this is a particular type of entranceway geometrically, which doesn't need a mezuzah because of its shape. However, we're going to move into a detailed discussion of this because all is not what it seems at this point in time. The only thing that's worth mentioning is that this Sha'ar Hamodi is going to be an arched doorway, which was actually quite common at the time. So you have a curved frame. The door goes up vertically, and then at a certain height, it begins to curve. And we will have some geometry lessons to try and configure the doorways in such a way, in such situations that might need a mezuzah and such situations that don't need a mezuzah. Nowadays, we're very lucky. Most of our doorways are rectangular vertical frames. Yeah, those are fairly easy to deal with. When you get into curved, arched ways, sort of old Gothic type entrances and stuff like that, you get into real halachic headaches as to whether there is a mezuzah. Is this a frame? Where's the frame? Where's the mashkov? Is there a lintel? There's no lintel. It's all over. It's curving everywhere. Does it need a mezuzah? So we'll have to see. This statement so far seems to exempt it from a mezuzah, but it will come with a number of riders and waivers, as we'll see later on. V'shar she'eino makora, and an entranceway that has no roof or top to it, no lintel. So very simply, a garden gate. If you have a garden gate entering into the courtyard, and the garden gate doesn't have any horizontal goalpost frame on top, it simply it simply has verticals, and then there's a gate that opens and closes. There's no mezuzah at the side of a gate like that because it does not have a vertical frame, a horizontal frame at the top, and that exempts it. You need to have essentially a doorway, as we understand it today. It needs to have two verticals and a horizontal on top, rather like the, as I say, the goalposts in the European football matches. You'd understand them. Without that structure, then you haven't got what is considered to be al mezuzos beisechu b'sharecha, and it is exempt from a mezuzah. So if it has no top horizontal frame, then it has not. It's not subject to mezuzah, even though the gate has a certain width and it enters into your home and etc. That does not qualify it for a mezuzah. V'shar she'eina gaveh asara, and this is very important, any gateway, any doorway that is not 10 tefachim high. The minimum height for an entranceway that requires a mezuzah is 10 tefachim. 10 tefachim is really pretty low. It's a tefach is about 4 inches. So therefore 10 tefachim is about 3.5 feet. I was thinking about it this being this way, 3.5 feet. So we're talking about a child's height. So any door which is lower than that child's height does not need a mezuzah. As soon as it's higher than that, it does need a mezuzah. It's not considered to be a chashuv entrance, if you like, if it's so low. So that won't need a mezuzah either. We will see later on that there's another requirement in terms of width. I mean, it's all very well to say it has to be 10 tefachim high, but how wide does this entranceway have to be in order to require a mezuzah? You can have a slit width, which looks like one of these Gothic lookout windows. Does that require a mezuzah? Of course not. You can just about get your eyes or your nose through it. It has to be a minimum of 4 tefachim wide. And again, that's not very wide. That's going to be about 1.5 to 2 feet wide. That's very narrow in terms of doors. If it's narrower than that, there is no mezuzah needed. If it's wider than that and it's 10 tefachim high, 10 high, 4 wide, then you can put a tick on it needing mezuzah. Except for the more complex cases we're going to come into in a moment, where the doorway happens to be curved, and then you get into a real headache. If it's rectangular and it is 10 up and 4 wide, then that's fine, and there is no safek. It requires min haTorah a mezuzah. Okay, now let's go with the Gemara. We're going to look at some of these cases in a bit more detail. We really are going to focus on this arched doorway. But just before we do that, the Gemara notices something which none of you have noticed. You should be all up raging mad, because the Brisa itself has just contradicted itself. Amalei, Rava said to this Rav Shmuel, who had just announced this halacha, he was teaching this Brisa to Rava. In other words, Rav Shmuel had a tradition of this halacha, which Rava was listening to. And Rava said to him, hold on there, posachta b'shisha, v'salkat b'shiva. You entered with 6 and you exited with 7. Count the number of cases we've just done over here. He starts off the Brisa saying shisha sha'arim, and how many have we got? Beis HaTeven is 1, Beis HaBokar is 2, Beis HaEtzim is 3, Beis HaOtzros is 4, Shar HaModai is 5, Shar She'ena Makora Klal is 6, the Shar She'ena Gavo Asor is 7. So the Brisa says here are 6 cases, and then it quotes 7. So this is what Rava says to challenge Rav Shmuel. So Amalei, so Rav Shmuel answered him. He responded, Shar HaModai Tzanoi, which is a bit of a strange answer. He says one of these cases, and this is our intro into this case of Shar Modai, the arched gateway, that case is subject to debate. In other words, there's a machlokas on really what it means, and if it's really true that it needs it or doesn't need it. So although the Brisa has introduced for us 7 cases, since one of those cases is not definitive, it's introduced the Brisa by saying there are only 6. It's a little bit of a weak answer, because the Brisa itself didn't say there was any difference between any of the 7, but that is the way Rav Shmuel answers. He says that the Shar HaModes is a little bit like being in parenthesis, because whereas all the others are agreed by everyone that they need a mezuzah, all the other criteria, all the other types of rooms, when it comes to Shar Modai, this is not agreed by all, and there's a machlokas tanoim on it, and therefore it is one which is a little bit not like the other 6. So that's what Rav said to Rav Shmuel. Shmuel said to Rav. Okay. So what does that mean? So the Gemara actually explains now in detail, as we'll see what it means. The Tanya, because it was taught in a Brisa, Kippah, and we're going to see it. We're going to build up the argument to explain this this curved arched doorway slowly. So let's just keep in mind as we go through, because as the Brisa goes through, it provides more detail. But we start off at this basic statement. Kippah. When it comes to a kippah is a dome, isn't it? The dome of the rock, whatever it is, the kippah is a dome. A kippah is also why is this called a kippah? Because it's curved on top, if you like. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, I don't know. Kippat HaShamayim we talk about, which is the vault of the heavens. It's another expression we use because it's a dome. So when we say here a dome, we mean here an arched entrance. Precisely this idea of Shar HaModi, an arched entrance. So the Brisa says the following: if you have an arched entrance, Rabbi Meir mechayev b'mezuzah. Rabbi Meir says that it requires a mezuzah. In other words, even though it's not the conventional rectangle, 2 absolute verticals with a top crossbar on top, which is the understood picture of a doorway requiring a mezuzah, Rabbi Meir says, nevertheless, even though this is not that typical picture, this doorway, this curved doorway also requires a mezuzah. However, the Chachamim Potrin, the sages exempt such a doorway. So again, the classic way of understanding this, simply before we build up any further, what the Brisa says is really saying that if the arched doorway is at least 10 by 4, and this is the question, what do we mean by 10 by 4 when you have an arched doorway? But let's just, before we look at what it really means, if it's at least got the the size parameters needed to justify mezuzah, then that's fine. Whereas the Chachamim say it isn't fine because it's the width is narrowing as you get higher and higher. So we'll have to see how this makes up in different circumstances. However, the Shovin, I will share some diagrams with you, don't worry. The Shovin, Rabbi Meir v'Chachamim, nevertheless, they agree on the following. They don't say that no situations of a curved doorway require a mezuzah. They do agree that a mezuzah is required for a doorway which is curved. In the following situations, they agree there needs to be a mezuzah. She'im yesh baragla. Again, misleading meaning. Ragla usually means its leg, doesn't mean its leg. If there is in the lower part of the door frame, asora, that means if there is in the lower part of the door frame, at least from the floor upwards, at least 10 tfachim of height, which up to the 10 points of tfachim in height, the doorway is still 4 tfachim wide, shechayeves b'mezuzah. But such a doorway requires a mezuzah. So let me share a screen with you. So even if you didn't understand my words, hopefully. Okay, it's not a very good picture. I do apologize. It's come out a bit blurred. I've taken this courtesy of the Art Scroll Gemara. So if you've got an Art Scroll Gemara, you'll see it there. Anyway, so here you have your arched doorway, right? You have an arched doorway. Here's a door, shall we say, some sort. Then you have the bricks around the door, or the stones around the door. It's curved. It's Shar HaModai. It's 4 wide, but of course it isn't 4 wide everywhere. When you get towards the top, it isn't 4 wide anymore. But this is a case where Rabbi Meir and Chachamim agree a mezuzah is required. Why? Because at least up to 10 tefachim in height, it hasn't yet started narrowing. So up to this point, you have got, if you like, the outline of a 10 by 4 rectangle. Within this total Shar HaModai, there is 10 by 4, there is 10 of height. All of that 10 from the floor up maintains 4 tefachim. Of course, if this is a very wide doorway, then you wouldn't have such a problem. You know, if it was 8 tefachim wide or whatever. But over here, it's already on the de minimis width of 4. So therefore, you need to have at least 10 tefachim of height where that 4 persists. So over here, this diagram is a case where you do have that. It only begins to narrow after it's reached 10 tefachim. So over here, both Rabbi Meir and Chachamim agree there needs to be a mezuzah. There's a little bit of a question mark over here because what we're looking at now are sort of geometrical mind's views of a door frame. I mean, this is not a 10 by 4 rectangular door frame. Whatever you say, it's 10 by 4, and up to that height, it is all 4 and wide, up to 10 tefachim in height. But the frame on top, where's the crossbar? The crossbar now is a curved crossbar. Didn't I say to you, you need a lintel, the crossbar? Now this crossbar is separated from the area that needs a mezuzah. If you can imagine, the only reason it needs a mezuzah, such a situation, is because you've got 10 and you've got 4 wide, but that's only within if you like, this rectangle area. So in this rectangle area is what gives this door frame the need for a mezuzah. However, you might say to me, well, I still don't think it needs a mezuzah because the cross lintel on top isn't immediately above here. The cross lintel is actually a curved lintel and it's separated from the 10 by 4 bar part. And wouldn't it be much nicer if we just had a lintel over here above the 10 by 4? We don't. So does it not lack a lintel? And if it lacks a lintel, the top crossbar, then maybe you shouldn't need a mezuzah anyway. So this is discussed because we now separated the top of the frame from the bit which really requires a mezuzah. This bit over here doesn't really require a mezuzah because it's not even 4 wide. It's narrowed. So the Rishonim say that the very fact that there is brickwork over here can act as the lintel, even though that brickwork over here is separated really from the area of the door frame, which is 10 by 4. That's the only way you can look at it. You still got a lintel. This lintel is like above, floating above the 10 by 4, but that's fine. And therefore, this needs a lintel. Both Rabbi Meir and Chachamim agree that this particular frame requires a lintel. So when we had this idea, we said before, well, according to one view, an arched doorway does not require a mezuzah. We said it was a matter of a machlokas. It's not entirely true. Here we have an arched doorway, and as long as it has these parameters, it does require a lintel according to all opinions. There is no machlokas. There's only going to be a machlokas on a slightly different variant of this. We'll get to that. The machlokas will be on a variant of this. So Amar Abai, now we're going on with the Gemara. Amar Abai, let me just stop sharing a minute. I'll go through the Gemara over here, first of all, in its complex argument, and then we'll go through the diagram and see how simple it is to understand this argument. Okay, and this argument is going to take us back to some of the techniques we used in Masechet Sukkah, which all you remember so very easily from the past, where all sorts of strange shapes are imagined when they're not really there. We imagine things are joined when they're not joined. We imagine things are upright when they're really curved. We had all sorts of very strange designations where a shape in reality we pretend in our halakhic mind's eye to be a different shape. We will have to use this to the best of our opinion again, to the best of our abilities, to imagine a shape to be some other shape than it really is. So it's good fun. But let's just go on and start the Gemara and see. Omer Abai. Abai says, now I'll explain to you where the machlokas between Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim really lies. It only lies in a certain, unusual set of parameters. That's where there will be a machlokas between Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim, whether an arched frame requires a mezuzah. So says Abai, first one, I'll tell you where everyone agrees on. Here are the situations where everyone really agrees. The Kuli Alma, everyone agrees. Kul Al means the whole world, means Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim. There is no argument. Gavoa Asara, the Ein Baragla Shalosha, Velav Klum Hui. If it is 10 high, but the bottom 3, it's 10 high. Second. For Ein Baragla Shlosha, but from the ground up to let me just say it first, and I'll show it to you on the chart maybe. There is no need for a mezuzah if it starts to curve very low down. That's really what it means. Inami yesh barag shlosha, if there are at least 3 tefachim in height from the floor, which are 4 tefachim wide, for eina gavoa asara tefachim, but it's not 10 high, lav klum hui, also doesn't need a mezuzah. Lo lechleku, when a Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim arguing, we'll see this on a piece of paper in a moment, ella begavoa asara, in a situation where it is 10 tefachim, the yesh baragala, and there is in the lower part of it, shlosha, at least 3 tefachim, which are 4 tefachim wide, but ve'ein berachba arba, but it isn't 4 tefachim wide in the rest of the height. V'yesh ba lachok. This sounds very messy, doesn't it? But it would be possible if you did so and took a chisel to chisel out of the wall at the sides, lahashlima la'arba, in order to make it 4 wide, even though if you didn't chisel, it's just a matter if you could chisel, then you would be able to make 4 wide. Even if it wasn't 4 wide in practice, then Rabbi Meir Sava chokikin lahashlim, v'Rabbanon Savre ein chokikin lahashlim. Rabbi Meir says that in your mind's eye, you actually chisel it out. And according to the Chomim, you don't get away with it by chiseling it out in your mind's eye. I hope that's all been clear. So now let's try and understand it from the diagram. The diagram will make things a little bit clearer. The problem over here, in a few cases, the Gemara uses terminologies like ragla and stuff like that, which doesn't mean how you would normally translate it. So let me try and share the screen and become as clear as mud. Okay, that's the one we've seen. Everyone's happy with this. Yeah, that's a simple case. That's a simple case where you had 10 by height, 4 by width, and it doesn't begin to narrow to less than 4 until it's higher than 10 from the ground. So there we say Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim agree that there is a need for a mezuzah, despite the fact that it curves higher up and the lintel is even further up above that. This is fine because at least you've got 10 vertical height, which is 4 wide. And that already means, according to everyone, a mezuzah is needed. This door would require a mezuzah to be placed at a position on the door. Okay, so here is where there is a machloket. What does that look like? It looks like a silo of some sort. Okay, so let's try and work out what's going on over here. Let me just explain to you what is the door and what is the frame and what is what over here. Imagine that this is a wall. All this is a wall. Well, I mean, here's the floor of the wall. The floor of the wall isn't down here. The floor of the wall is along here. Let me just make this a little bit bigger. Okay. At the floor level, it is 4 wide. So that ticks a box. We like it. Its total vertical height up to the point is also 10 high. We like it. But we don't like it for very many other reasons, because it really isn't what we'd like it to be. I mean, what we would like it to be, again, is a doorway that was in this dotted line. Then it would be 4 wide all the way through the entire 10 and this dotted line. But it isn't. The doorway is actually this Gothic-sized bullet-shaped vertical bullet inside. That's the actual doorway, which is unfortunate. Another thing unfortunate about this door, this is going to be the subject of machlokas. In other words, according to one opinion, this will require a mezuzah, and according to another opinion, it will not require a mezuzah. It is only 4 wide up to a height of 3 tefachim. Yeah, at this point, exactly 3 height, it begins to narrow, and it becomes less than 4, which is less than the minimum 4 that require a mezuzah. So it's a pretty marginal case of a 4 width. So the Gemara said the following. This is going to be the subject of machlokas. Let me just tell you first of all what's not the subject of machlokas. There were 2 cases which he brought which are not going to be the subject of machlokas. Everyone is going to agree no mezuzah is needed. One is if this narrowing to less than 4 started at a position less than 3 tefachim from the floor. Over here, it started exactly 3 tefachim. But supposing it was even more curved, so it went up like this, and then already started to arch closer than 3 tefachim to the floor. Everybody would agree, even though it went up a full 10, in other words, it started to curve like here, and it was very, very pointy, and it was only 4 wide for less than 3 tefachim. There was absolutely agreement there. There would be no mezuzah needed. Remember this, we're going back to Sukkah, etc. This idea that 3 tefachim, something which is about 1 foot, is considered lovud. It's considered it's not there at all. If there isn't at least 3 tefachim, which is 4 wide, we consider this not to have anything that's 4 wide. Again, that's a halakhic statement that less than 3 tefachim is invalid in any types of measurement at all, in terms of the halachic needs for something. If something is less than 3 tefachim high, it's as if it weren't there. So therefore, if it begins to narrow less than 3 tefachim from the floor, it's as if it was never 4 wide at all. It's as if the only thing you had was narrowing less than 3 tefachim. Everybody would agree. It's such a bizarre door that started to narrow so quickly near the floor to under 4 tefachim would not require mezuzah. Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim, that's out of the question. Another case that's out of the question as requiring mezuzah is where the height of this door never reaches 10 tefachim. That you can understand. There has to be at least 10 somewhere. And if it starts and it stops over here, and then it comes down, then it's not 10 tefachim. Everybody would agree no mezuzah is needed. So, okay, those are the 2 cases which he first brought, which were lav klumhu, that you don't need a mezuzah at all, where it narrows so quickly that it already doesn't give us 3 tefachim of height, which are 4 wide, and another case where you never had 10 tefachim high. So where's the machlokas? The machlokas is in this situation. You have a door which for at least 3 tefachim from the floor is 4 wide. So therefore it does exist. There is a place which is 4 wide, and it's a real place of at least 3 tefachim in vertical height. It is also a total of at least 10 tefachim high, and that's also good. But where's the machlokas, Rabbi Meir and Chachamim? The Chachamim say, let's do Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir has this imaginary idea in his mind that we can designate in our minds as if a builder chops away from the wall and makes the wall wider than it really is, even though in this case there is no builder and there's no one chopping away in the wall. In other words, he uses a process called chokekin hashlim, which is a virtual process in your mind's eye. What's the virtual process in your mind's eye? He says the following. He says, even though this case is narrowing very quickly after 3 tefachim, it's certainly not 10 tefachim. It's certainly not this situation where you have 10 tefachim high or 4 wide. But nevertheless, if you can imagine and you draw a construction within the door, and you could have hewed away this lot and this lot, then you would have a rectangular door frame of 10 by 4. Yeah. In other words, if you wanted, you could call your builder over and you could say, look, this is not a frame I want to put my mezuzah on. Could you please chop away this bit here and chop away this bit here? That's all closed in. Yeah. It's part of the frame over here. You could chop this in, then all of a sudden the entranceway would be a vertical rectangle, 4 wide by a full 10 high. Since you could in theory do that, even though in practice you don't do it, we imagine you've done it and you put a mezuzah up. Bizarre, isn't it? But this is one of the virtual realities, which we've seen this in the Sechet Sukkah sometimes. We say that if you have strings which are 3 tefachim apart, we imagine them to be closed up. We said also that if you have a wall that doesn't go all the way down to the ground, that if it goes within 3 tefachim of the ground, it's considered to go right down to the ground. It doesn't go down to the ground. Don't worry. In your mind's eye, you can imagine anything that exists higher up to be extended virtually to the ground. You can also imagine certain walls to be virtually extended up. And then we had in Sukkah this extraordinary case of Dofan Akuma, where you actually have the walls too far away from the schach, where according to the halacha, you say that you can imagine as if the walls were tapered over, all sorts of strange constructions that don't actually exist in reality, have halachic standing. And over here, Rabbi Meir says, I will halachically pretend that this door has been hewed out to produce a full rectangle, even though in fact it's only this bullet. And therefore, he says you would need a mezuzah. Where would you place a mezuzah over here? Almost at your knee level or something less, right? I mean, you wouldn't put it far away from the open frame. You'd probably place it somewhere over here. You have to bend down to kiss it. So according to, don't forget, this whole thing's only 3.5 feet high. This is only 3 tvachim. It's only 1 foot above the ground. Yeah. So he says, nevertheless, you can imagine that this is 10 by 4. That's Rabbi Meir. The Chachamim, and I think you'd be pleased to know the halacha is not like Rabbi Meir, so you can almost forget it. But Rabbi Chachamim say, Ein chokekin lahashlim. We do not imagine this process of hewing out to create a vertical and rectangular door frame if that is not the reality. We look at the reality. In this reality, we don't want a mezuzah, say the Chachamim. To say that you could, in theory, hew it out, let's pretend you have, and we don't go for that. As far as we're concerned, he says, you need at least this. That's the Chachamim. You need 10 height by 4 wide. It has to be 4 wide for a full 10. Over here, it's 4 wide by a full 3. And only by this magic of Rabbi Meir do we extend it upwards by this process of chokekin lahashlim. No, say the Chachamim, I won't give you that. And the halacha doesn't seem to be like Rabbi Meir, that you say chokekin lahashlim. In other words, according to the halacha, you would really need to have 10 vertical height by 4 wide. And it's very common, by the way, to have arched doorways in many places now, except usually this question doesn't arrive even in an arched doorway, because an arched doorway will normally be much more than 4 wide, even to start off with. And it would probably arch much higher up. So in most of the arched doorways we see even today, there's no way that you're anywhere near the de minimis of 10 by 4. We're more than 10 high. We're far more than 4. We're probably more like 10 tvachim at least wide. And so therefore you've got a very easy door frame, and you don't normally have to call your local Orthodox rabbi to come in to see whether in fact it's valid or not. These are therefore hypothetical cases. You've seen door flaps for cats and dogs that might have this sort of problem, but then if it was just for a cat or a dog, then maybe you wouldn't need it. One's reminded some of the questions. If you remember Alice Through the Looking Glass, where she shrinks and she goes very much smaller, and then she becomes very much bigger. So when she's very much smaller, some of those doorways might have been much more this sort of height. Okay, let's quit this particular interesting example. Okay, so this was a bizarre example, but we were talking here about archways, and I think we learn something about the need for 10 vertical height, 4 width. We also learn that there is a problem with a very de minimis arched doorway, and at least according to the Rabbi Meir, you might still require a mezuzah for the most bizarre shaped, very, very low strung arched doorway, something that doesn't really bother us. But the Chachamim don't use this virtual mindscape of chokekin lahashlim. You pretend that you've hewed out an area which you really haven't hewed out. Okay, now we carry on with the Gemara. Tana Rabban, and these cases are a bit easier now, I think, rather than all this geometry again. We need to come back to that for quite a while. Tana Rabbanon, our rabbis taught, the Brisa says the following: Beis HaKnesses. Now we're going to, as I said, some of this is going to be subject to dispute. This very first case is going to be dealt with in halacha differently to the way we see it now. A shul, a Beis HaKnesses. Now, Beis HaKnesses would be a place where people would come to daven, and also for various meetings, possibly. Some people, we won't know yet whether we're talking about people sleeping in the building or upstairs the building. Let's assume at the moment it's just a conventional davening place. Uveis ha'isha, becomes very strange over here. A woman's house. What does that mean? Let's assume it's referring to a house belonging to a woman. So it's just a lady's house. So she doesn't have a husband with her. She's single, or she's whatever it is. Ubeis hashutofim, and a house that belongs to more than one individual. It's a shared home. What does that mean? Does it mean that you live there with your house, with your partner, or your wife, or your husband, or does it mean like a block of flats, a block of apartments where there are more than one apartment that opens up into a general area and there's an entranceway? So it's a joint entranceway. It's not at all clear. Chayeves b'mezuzah. They do need a mezuzah. Well, you'll feel relieved over here. A woman's house does need a mezuzah, and a partnership house does need a mezuzah. The Gemara is going to immediately say that these are obvious. Why would I even think that they don't need a mezuzah? Beis HaKnesses is not so obvious, because it depends what goes on in a Beis HaKnesses. So that will be the subject of more discussion later on. But the Gemara now says Pshita. I have no reason to believe that these cases don't need a mezuzah. Why do I need a brisa to teach me that? Is there any reason to believe or to have any suspicion that they would not need a mezuzah, that I would need to be taught that they do need a mezuzah? And the Gemara explains why. The brisa bothers to tell you. Mahu de tema, I might have thought, when I read the posuk in the Torah, which is the root of the halacha, Uchesavtom al mezuzos beisecha ubishorecha, then how might have I translated beisecha? I might have translated beisecha below beisah. Beisecha, it didn't say beisech, it says beisecha. It's a bit far-fetched, but I might just have thought this is in the masculine, and therefore it only applies to a home which belongs to a male. I mean, we have this idea of mitzvahs aseh shazman garoma, time-bound mitzvahs, non-time-bound mitzvahs. I might just have thought that there was something in the verse that suggests that a mezuzah, just like certain other mitzvahs, only need to be carried out by the males and not by the females. So therefore, I need to be taught that even a beis of isha doesn't mean to exclude women. Women's homes are needed just the same way as the males. Also, because it says beisecha, a beisecha is actually a singular. You should put it on the doorpost of your home. It doesn't say beisechem, if you like, your homes, or whatever it is, or so I might have done below botehem that it doesn't include a place, a home that is essentially belongs to more than one person. It might be construed to mean only a home belonging to an individual, which one individual has balut. So therefore, Kamash Malon, therefore, the Brisa has to teach us this, that there are no exclusions. In case you might have come to this sort of derivation of the word beisecha, the Brisa comes to teach you that there would be an incorrect derivation, and it comes to include a woman's place and a jointly owned premises, etc., that all need a mezuzah. But now the Gemara actually asks, if you like, or rather the obvious question, for Ema Hachinami, you're saying to me that the Brisa needs to tell us not to learn the posuk in a certain way. If I learn the posuk in a certain way, I might come to exclude a woman's home. I might come to exclude a home that's owned jointly by more than one. Well, maybe I should exclude them. What tells you? Where does the Brisa get its refutation of this derivation from? You have just given me a derivation. Beisecha, it's masculine. Beischa, and it's not a plural. So maybe that Torah is trying to tell you that. Maybe it's wrong to say that a woman's home needs a mezuzah, or that a plurally opened home needs a mezuzah. Maybe that derivation is in fact the correct derivation. How does the Brisa know otherwise? So actually now the Gemara gives very interesting answer, and the answer here is a svara. It's a general reasoning answer, which is problematic in a sense if you've got a posuk. But let's just go on. The Gemara says, Omakra, the Gemara says, I cannot interpret it that way. I can simply not interpret it to believe that, for example, a woman or a plurality of people shouldn't have a mezuzah. Why not? Even though you could look at the word beisecha to so construe, but why wouldn't I not be able to construe it that way? Why does the Brisa know that that's not right? Because, after all, what does the Kriya Shema say later on? It says, Laman yirbu yumeichem v'imei v'neichem. This is very problematic proof. Why should you do all the mitzvahs, etc., in Kriya Shema? It goes on to say, in order that your days and the days of your children will be lengthened, etc., in order that you should live a long life. you should perform mitzvahs. In other words, the Kriya Shema is telling you should do the following things. It says that you should, what is this all for? In order that you should have a long life. And so the Gemara says, if that is the reason the Torah gives us for those mitzvahs, then I would say to you, Hani boy chayiv, hani lo boy chayiv? Are you saying that only certain people need a long life and other people don't need a long life? In other words, the Torah is giving us a fact over here that if you perform these mitzvahs, then you will be entitled, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will be mezaka you with a long life. But it should not only be men that want a long life. And what about people who live together and jointly own homes? They don't need a long life? The Pasuk says these mitzvahs are given to you in order to lengthen your life. Now, if you exclude these people from the Mezuzah, it says only Beisecha means only the masculine, and it only means the singular ownership and not the plural ownership. You're essentially saying you're carrying out a mitzvah in a way that will only give certain categories of people a long life and exclude other people from having a long life. And that, says the Gemara, is bizarre. And therefore, I wouldn't learn out Beisecha to mean only a male and not a woman, and only to mean a singular, not a plural, because it cuts against the meaning that the Torah implies in the man yirbu yumechem mevenechem. It's a very interesting idea that the answer brings in, the Gemara brings in over here, because very often when we learn a drasha or a pasuk in a certain way, we learn it and we say that since the Torah writes it this way, who are we to argue? Who are we to argue? The Torah says that you have to take an esrig and a lulav. An esrig and a lulav. I may think it would be nice to take a pineapple, but I don't take a pineapple, even though a pineapple smells nicer than esrig, and it's a more beautiful fruit. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't take the most beautiful, fruit we take for our Rosh Hashanah, as a new fruit, which is probably more striking than an esrig, even though the Torah says Pri Eitz Hadar, you should take Pri Eitz Hadar, so I should choose the most beautiful. I've got no right to do that. I've got to live within the text of the Torah. So you might have thought that what is primary is the text, and not necessarily a meaning that we read into it for reasons of logic. So that if a text says the male, if you can really read the text straightforwardly to mean the male and not the female, then that should be it. If we say that certain mitzvahs, only a man really is mitzvah on putting on tefillin and not a woman, because it's a mitzvah aseh shazman groma, then we don't argue there. Hang on, a woman should be on tefillin also because it leads to long life. By the way, this is a kasha because it also says in Kriya Shema, you could ask, why don't women have to put on tefillin? Just like it says, it says, so therefore, tefillin also for a long life, because Leman Yirbu Yumechin comes out of the two of them, after the two of them. So therefore, we should argue that a woman also should put tefillin on min haTorah. I'm not talking about here Rashi's daughters or anything, but just like a man, she should put it on. And yet we have a rule that a woman doesn't put on tefillin because it's a time-bound mitzvah. We are using this idea of a long life here selectively, and somehow we're saying that when it comes to mezuzah, we say the reason is clear. However you read the text of the verse, since it says that the rationale is a long life, I say to you that we can't deprive a woman of long life, and we don't follow the simple translation of the text. When it comes to tefillin, we're not saying the same thing. So that is a question. I'm not sure what the answer is over here. Why doesn't a woman have to wear tefillin for exactly the same reason? Doesn't she need a long life as well? And Laman Yibu Yumechem comes for not just the mezuzah, but also the tefillin. And therefore, should also have to teach us our children Torah, because it said, and therefore, and everything following that, all those mitzvahs are part of the bundle. After which it says, L'man Yibru Yumechem, so maybe a woman should also be going and learning in the base of Medrash, and she should become a kolel wife, and the husband should be looking after the wife. You can turn the whole of Torah upside down when you actually do this. You turn all our traditions upside down. Over here, the Gemara, nevertheless, is focusing on the mezuzah. and saying even though there is a reason to learn the pasuk one way, which would exempt a woman, for example, it would not be in line with the way I understand Leman Yubu Yameichem. And therefore, I would say don't translate the pasuk in the masculine, even though it might appear to be in the masculine, and therefore a woman's home also requires a mezuzah. And so the Gemara next goes on with we should do this, just this next piece. Okay, says the Gemara, you're telling me now that I should ignore the text, as I said. There is a text that implies, let's say from the man and not the woman, beisecha, doesn't say beisech or whatever it is. So therefore maybe it should be the man, maybe it should be the man and not the woman. I should ignore that because it doesn't follow in line with long life, and women need long life as well. But then I will still ask you, why does it say beisecha? Why does the Torah try to mislead me, if you like, with a masculine when it didn't need to do so? It's misleading me with a masculine, and now I've got to ignore it. So why is it there in the masculine if I'm going to ignore it? Why does the Torah put us in a position where we have to ignore the meaning, the plain text, in favor of some other consideration? Just before we go any further, very often the Torah puts things in the masculine and the feminines included. So over here, this whole discussion is a little bit problematic, but let's just carry on. The implication is it's in the masculine. We're being told to ignore that implication because of the broader considerations of man Yerbi Yemechem. So it says the Gemara, why does the Torah give us this expression in the first place? What's it there for if it isn't there to tell us it only applies to males? So the Gemara now gives you the reason why it would still be a valid statement, even though it applies to females as well. Kidarov, according to Rava's view, he says the following, and it's a very strange Beisech Visharecha. Kidarova, Rava says it needs to say Beisecha. To Omer Rava, it says Beisecha. You can imagine it doesn't mean your house. You completely need to retranslate it, and then you won't have this problem. If you say Beisecha means it talk about a house that belongs to someone, then it seems to be in the masculine rather than the feminine. If you retranslate Beisecha in the form of Derech Bi Asacha, this is a bit of a cheat. Beisecha, if you put an aleph, listen to this play on the word here, Bi Asacha. The only difference between Bi Asacha and Beisecha is the aleph between the Yud and the Soch. So he says, imagine that the word is not derech beisecha, it's derech biasacha. It means you put a mezuzah in the way in which you would enter your premises. It's got nothing to do with who owns the premises, male or female. It's to do with the way in which you enter your premises. Now so what does it teach you? They teach you put a mezuzah where you would enter the premises, but more so comes up with this astonishing idea that it tells you which side of the door frame to put a mezuzah on the right side rather than the left side. Where do you see this? Where do you see the way in which you enter the premises to refer to right rather than left? Where is there a right left? So listen to this. When a person, let's say you got your key and you've just unlocked the door, what do you do instinctively when you place a foot forward over the threshold? So he says, when a person typically lifts up his leg, her leg, makes no difference, to go forward, you argue with this, he raises his right leg first. So therefore, that tells us, the Torah is hinting to us that you should put up the mezuzah derech biasacha with the directionality in which you enter into the door frame. Since the directionality is that you lift up your right foot first, that's the reason he says we know that mezuzah goes on the right frame and not on the left frame. Very, very strange derivation. Anyway, I started to think for myself, I can't work it out. Do I tend to get up after this chair? Am I going to move my right leg before my left leg? It's not at all obvious to me. But it certainly was to Chazal that when you enter into your home, you tend to, is it anything to do with right-handedness? left-handedness, right-footedness, I really don't know, but according to Chazal, it is right foot before left foot. I think that's partly to do with where the door is hinged. So the door is hinged on the right. Maybe it should be the left foot that goes first. Anyway, who am I to argue? Chazal, Robert is saying it's got nothing to do with masculine or feminine. It's got to do with the way you be oscar, the way you go in, and therefore you don't have a problem with Beisachar indicating the masculine or feminine. It's indicating the side of the door frame on which to affix the mezuzah. Okay, I think that's enough for today.